Perez Hilton is finally breaking his silence about the shocking reason behind his 21-day hospital stay, and the truth is far more intense, emotional, and eye-opening than anyone expected. For someone who built an empire on constant updates, hot takes, and never missing a beat in the world of celebrity gossip, his sudden disappearance raised serious questions. Fans noticed almost immediately. The man who once dominated headlines with his commentary had become the headline himself, and no one knew why. Now, Perez Hilton, whose real name is Mario Armando Lavandera Jr., is opening up about those 21 days that changed everything. And what makes this story even more compelling is not just the medical emergency itself, but everything surrounding it: the buildup, the silence, the speculation, and ultimately the reality that hit much harder than anyone anticipated. It all started quietly. No dramatic moment, no obvious red flags, just subtle physical symptoms that didn't seem urgent at first. He described feeling off, experiencing discomfort that was easy to ignore in the chaos of everyday life. Like so many people, he brushed it aside, telling himself it was nothing serious. Maybe stress, maybe fatigue, maybe just another one of those things that would pass. But it didn't. Instead, those symptoms intensified, slowly at first, then all at once. What began as something manageable turned into something impossible to ignore. Perez described reaching a point where his body essentially forced him to stop. That's when he made the decision to go to the hospital, a decision he now says likely saved his life. And even that decision wasn't easy. He admitted that part of him hesitated. Like many people, he didn't want to believe something serious could be happening. There's always that voice in your head telling you it's nothing, that you're overreacting, that you'll be fine. But this time, ignoring it wasn't an option. The moment he arrived, everything changed. Doctors didn't hesitate. After an initial evaluation, he was admitted almost immediately. That alone was enough to shake him. For someone used to being in control, used to running his own narrative, suddenly being placed in a hospital bed with no clear answers was deeply unsettling. And the uncertainty was just beginning. For days, Perez underwent test after test, blood work, scans, monitoring, an endless cycle of procedures designed to figure out exactly what was happening inside his body. But answers didn't come quickly, and that waiting period, he said, was one of the hardest parts. Because when you're waiting like that, your mind doesn't stay quiet. It races, it jumps to conclusions, it imagines the worst-case scenarios. He described lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind running through every possibility. Was it something temporary, something chronic, something life-threatening? I didn't know what was going on, he admitted, and that was terrifying. And time moves differently in a hospital. Hours feel longer, nights feel endless. Every small update feels huge. Every delay feels heavy. As the days stretched into a week and then into 2, the reality of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a quick hospital visit. This wasn't something that would be resolved overnight. This was serious. Eventually, doctors identified the issue, a significant medical condition that required constant care, monitoring, and a carefully managed treatment plan. While Perez has chosen not to disclose every detail, he made it clear that the situation was severe enough to justify a prolonged stay, and that his health had been in real danger. "I was not okay," he said plainly. "There were moments I was scared, really scared." And that fear stayed with him, not just in the beginning, but throughout the entire experience. Because even after a diagnosis, even after treatment begins, there's still uncertainty. There's still the question of how your body will respond. There's still the fear of complications. And there's still the emotional weight of everything you're going through. That fear wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Being in the hospital for 21 days means stepping away from everything: your routine, your work, your distractions. And for Perez Hilton, someone whose life has been defined by staying connected, constantly posting, constantly engaging, that kind of isolation was a shock to the system. He spoke openly about the loneliness, about the quiet, about the long nights where sleep didn't come easily, and his thoughts became louder than ever. He talked about the sounds of the hospital, the steady beeping of machines, the distant footsteps in the hallways, the occasional conversations between nurses, sounds that, over time, became almost comforting, a strange kind of rhythm, a reminder that life was still moving around him even if his own world had slowed down completely. And in that quiet, something shifted. He began to reflect, not just on his health, but on his life as a whole. He thought about the years he spent chasing stories, breaking news, staying ahead of trends, the pressure to always be on, always be relevant, always be part of the conversation, the pressure to maintain an image, to stay visible, to keep going no matter what. He realized how rarely he allowed himself to stop, to breathe, to simply exist without the constant noise of the outside world. And that realization was powerful, because for the first time in a long time, he had no choice but to be present. No distractions, no deadlines, no endless scrolling. Just him, his thoughts, and the reality of what he was going through. He admitted that there were moments of regret, moments where he wished he had taken better care of himself, moments where he questioned whether the pace he'd been living at was sustainable, moments where he wondered if this could have been prevented. I wasn't listening to my body, he reflected. I should have paid attention sooner. And that's something so many people can relate to, because it's easy to ignore the signs. It's easy to push through discomfort. It's easy to tell yourself that you'll deal with it later, until later becomes too late. But alongside that regret came something else, clarity, a deeper understanding of what truly matters. He spoke about the doctors and nurses who cared for him, describing them as compassionate, patient, and incredibly dedicated. In a time when he felt vulnerable and out of control, they became a source of stability. They were amazing, he said, truly amazing. He recalled specific moments, nurses checking in during the middle of the night, adjusting his treatment, making sure he was comfortable. Doctors taking the time to explain procedures in detail, answering questions, offering reassurance. Small acts of kindness that made a huge difference during such a difficult time. Those moments stayed with him. They grounded him. They reminded him that even in the hardest situations, there is still humanity, still compassion, still connection. And then there were the messages. As news of his hospitalization began to spread, fans flooded his social media with support, messages from people around the world, some who had followed him for years, others who had only recently discovered him. People shared their own stories, their own health scares, their own moments of fear and recovery. And in those messages, Perez found something unexpected, a sense of community. A reminder that he wasn't alone, that even though he was physically isolated in that hospital room, there were people out there who cared, who were thinking about him, who were hoping he would recover. That support meant everything, and it gave him strength during some of the toughest moments of his stay. He also addressed the rumors that circulated during his absence. As expected, the internet had plenty of theories, some dramatic, some completely off base. Some people assumed the worst, others created stories that had no connection to reality. But instead of letting those rumors define the narrative, Perez chose to take control of his own story. People will always talk, he said, but this is my truth. And by sharing his experience, he not only set the record straight, but also opened up a larger conversation about health, vulnerability, and the importance of taking care of yourself. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Perez Hilton. It's about something much bigger. It's about the way we often ignore our bodies, the way we normalize stress, the way we treat exhaustion like it's just part of life, the way we push through discomfort without asking why it's there in the first place. It's about the cost of that mindset and the consequences that can come with it. For Perez, those consequences were real. They were immediate, and they were life-changing. As the 21 days came to an end and he was finally able to leave the hospital, it wasn't a moment of instant relief. It wasn't a dramatic exit where everything suddenly felt okay. It was quiet, emotional, almost surreal. Because after being in that environment for so long, stepping outside feels different. The world feels different. You feel different. It was a transition from one phase of recovery to another, because healing doesn't stop when you walk out of the hospital doors. In many ways, that's just the beginning. He talked about adjusting to life outside the hospital, about taking things slowly, about learning how to trust his body again, about being mindful of his limits, and about continuing to prioritize his health in ways he hadn't before. He acknowledged that it's not always easy, that there are still challenges, still moments of uncertainty, still days where he feels stronger and others where he has to take a step back. But he's approaching it all with a different mindset now, a more intentional mindset, one that values balance, one that recognizes the importance of rest, one that understands that success means nothing if you don't have your health. He also hinting at changes in how he plans to move forward professionally. While he hasn't completely stepped away from the world he built, he's thinking more carefully about how he engages with it, how much he takes on, how he manages his time, and how he protects his well-being. Because after everything he's been through, one thing is clear: he's not willing to go back to the way things were before. This experience changed him. It shifted his perspective. It forced him to confront realities he had been avoiding, and in doing so, it gave him something valuable, a second chance, a chance to do things differently, a chance to prioritize what truly matters, a chance to live with more awareness, more intention, and more gratitude. And that's something that resonates far beyond the world of celebrity news, because everyone, in one way or another, can relate to the idea of being pushed to a breaking point, to the idea of realizing too late that something needs to change, to the idea of wanting a second chance. Perez Hilton's story is a reminder that those moments, as difficult as they are, can also be transformative. They can be the wake-up call you didn't know you needed, the turning point that sets you on a different path, the moment that changes everything. And as he continues on that path, one thing remains certain: he's not taking anything for granted. Not his health, not his time, not his life. Because now, more than ever, he understands just how quickly things can change, and how important it is to be ready when they do. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. Not the headlines, not the speculation, not even the diagnosis itself, but the reminder that life can shift in an instant, that your body will always tell you when something isn't right, and that listening to it could make all the difference. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more celebrity updates just like this.